Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Ukrainian officials say that overnight Russian strikes have injured civilians, including children, with critical infrastructure and apartment buildings targeted. It comes as Ukrainian strikes have reportedly led to fires at a power substation in Russia's Rostov region. This comes as reports suggest that the EU is preparing sanctions on China over allegations that Beijing is supplying drones to Russia secretly. Alarms have been raised in Brussels over Chinese support for Russia amid its war against Ukraine. US President Donald Trump has once again threatened harsh tariffs on India over New Delhi's purchasing of Russian oil. India has responded sharply, calling the attack unjustified and vowing to defend its economic interests. Israel is set to allow the gradual flow of goods into Gaza through local merchants, aiming to reduce civilian reliance on international aid. It comes as 40 arrests were made outside of a Trump hotel at a protest against the war in Gaza, as military action continues in the enclave. The US has condemned an order from Brazil's Supreme Court placing former President Jair Bolsonaro under house arrest. The right-wing ally of Donald Trump is standing trial over allegations that he plotted a coup to overturn an election result, which he denies. The dismembered remains of 32 people have been found in an abandoned house in Mexico, according to prosecutors. The discovery was made in Guanajuato, where violence is prevalent. 15 people have so far been positively identified from the remains. Sean Diddy Combs has been denied his latest bail request while awaiting sentencing after being convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution. The music mogul will remain in custody with his sentencing set for October the 3rd. And officials in Hong Kong have issued the highest level black weather warning as the region is hit with its heaviest rainfall since 1884. Major disruption has been caused with hospital clinics, schools and courts shut across the city. But we start this hour with a report by a US news outlet, Politico, which has said that the European Union is preparing sanctions against China over its alleged supply of drone parts to Russia and possibly supporting Moscow's ongoing military operations in Ukraine. According to these reports, 15 EU countries have confronted Beijing about the shipments, but China has either denied involvement or refused to respond. As per a European diplomat speaking to Politico, the EU plans to push for sanctions after August. This comes after reports appeared to have claimed that China has been supplying motors for drones disguised as commercial refrigeration units to bypass existing Western sanctions. These supplies are believed to aid Russia's effort in Ukraine, further escalating tensions between the EU and China. Well, joining us to discuss this development and these reports is Stephen Nagy, a professor at the International Christian University, who's joining us live from Budapest. Stephen, thank you, as always, for joining us. Some big developments. We do have to caveat that these are only reports. We haven't had official confirmation yet. But how significant would this be if the EU looks to place sanctions on China over these alleged drone parts shipments?
Well, thanks, Joshua, for having me. And I think it's really important for us to look at China's involvement in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, primarily from the viewpoint of supporting Russia's war efforts. And that means supporting its war economy, the ability to continue to produce the kinds of equipment, drones, weaponry, and machinery to be involved and continue to prosecute the war against Ukraine. Most evidence suggests that China has used third countries to deliver those resources to Russia. Most reports has shown that it's been a significant boost in Russia's capability to continue to prosecute a war against the Ukraine. And of course, if Ukraine loses or Ukraine continues to fracture or continue continues to engage in war with Russia, this is certainly not in United European Union's interest. And with that, I think the European Union has said this is our red line. We can no longer tolerate China's indirect support through third countries for Russia's war on Ukraine, and they are moving to do something. I guess the questions that I have regarding this statement by the European Union is what is the connection to the recent trade deal with the Trump administration? Is it part of a coordinated effort to, again, cut off Russia, or is it something that's been done unilaterally by the Europeans themselves? And at this stage, we don't know.
Yes, Stephen, how do we expect China may react, not just to these potential allegations, but also if sanctions are placed on them?
Denial, denial, denial. The foreign minister and its spokespeople will continue to say that China has conducts its foreign policy based on the so-called 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, non-interference, respecting each other's sovereignty, mutual respect, non-aggression, and win-win diplomacy. But in reality, as we look at the partnership without limits between Russia and China that was signed just prior to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, what we've seen is that the Chinese have shifted their position and continue to support Russia. They understand the conflict with Ukraine slightly differently, that if Russia does lose, that it will come out much weaker. It could potentially fracture, or it could become more hyper-nationalistic. And from China's perspective, all these 3 scenarios are negative for China, in that if Russia loses, the United States will then concentrate all its resources, including the resources of the EU and other countries, on China. If Russia fractures, this is very dangerous for China in terms of energy resources and other resources that are delivered to China. And if China becomes more Russia becomes more hyper-nationalistic, well, this could become a much bigger problem for China, because they've wed their economy, their energy resources, and their diplomacy to their neighbor, Russia.
Absolutely. Stephen, please do stay with us. Of course, there is a lot to monitor in this situation, and we wait to see if there are any sanctions placed after these allegations. But we do move on now as Hiroshima prepares to mark 80 years since the city was destroyed in the world's first nuclear attack. Record 120 countries, regions and the EU are set to attend the anniversary of the US atomic bombing of Hiroshima in 1945, which killed an estimated 140,000 people. While Russia will again be absent, its ally Belarus will participate for the first time in 4 years after Hiroshima lifted its ban on both countries due to the Russia-Ukraine war. Last year, survivors of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks won recognition for their campaign to rid the world of nuclear weapons when a nationwide network of Hibakushu Nohin Hideanko was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. However, the world seems to edge closer to a new age of nuclear brinkmanship. The world's 9 nuclear states are spending billions of dollars on modernising and, in some cases, expanding their arsenals. Meanwhile, the number of registered survivors of both attacks fell to just below 100,000 this year, according to the Health Ministry, compared with more than 372,000 in 1981. On the eve of the anniversary, the ministry said it would no longer conduct a survey every 10 years to assess the living conditions and health of Hibakusha, saying it wanted to lessen the burden on ageing survivors. Let's now listen to what some of the Korean survivors of the bombing have to say 80 years after the disaster.
현재 한국에는 원복 피해자 1세 분들이 전국에 한 1,600여 분이 지금 생존해 계십니다. 제가 볼 때 1세대 분들에 대한 사회적인 어떤 배려라든지 또는 국가에 대한 관심도 당연히 필요하고, 무엇보다도 2세, 3세 후손회 중에서도 특히 장애를 가지고 태어난 분들, 또 후천적으로 장애를 가진 그런 2세, 3세 환우들이 많이 있습니다. 이분들에 대한 그 국가적인 지원 또는 사회적인 관심이 반드시 특별법에 포함이 되어서 특별법이 개정되어야.
今の被爆者は全てが海外に住もうと外国人であろうと差のないような待遇をされてきたと。 されていると。ね。そう思う本当に。思わないでしょ。在庁被爆者だけが蚊帳の外ですよ。支援の対象にはなってないんですよ。
We welcome back Stephen Nagy to discuss this topic. Stephen, how important is it that nearly 80 years on from this attack on Hiroshima, that the events are remembered so lessons can potentially be learnt?
Well, again, thanks, Joshua. So there's many lessons to be learned here. The hibakusha, those people that are the survivors of both Hiroshima, but let's not forget Nagasaki, which the second atomic bomb happened 3 days later, are still with us. They're a reminder of the terrible damage that occurred on those two historic days. But at the same time, I think Hiroshima reminds us that today, the logic of nuclear weapons, unfortunately, is still with us. China is continuing to expand its nuclear weapon arsenal. We expect it to reach at least 1,500 nuclear weapons or more by 2035. North Korea continues to expand not only its delivery systems, but it's engaged in refining its nuclear weapons to 250 to 350 by some estimates. Understanding that nuclear weapons really do act as regime protection. And you only have to look to Ukraine and Iran to look for evidence that if you don't possess nuclear weapons, that you are vulnerable to attack from great powers. And both Ukraine and Iran are learning that lesson today, but so are other states that are interested in acquiring nuclear weapons, as we unfortunately see nuclear weapons proliferation widening, despite, again, these important anniversaries, such as the first bomb in Hiroshima and 3 days later, the second atomic bomb usage on Nagasaki.
Yes, Stephen Nagy, thank you ever so much for taking the time to comment on this topic and also the previous one as well. We will, of course, monitor the 80th anniversary of that attack on Hiroshima and bring you all of the updates from that memorial event. Moving on now to North America, and Texas Governor Greg Abbott has threatened to arrest Democratic lawmakers who fled the state to block a Republican-backed redistricting plan. Over 50 Democrats left Texas for states like Illinois and New York to deny Republicans the quorum needed to pass the plan. The redistricting aims to redraw congressional districts and could help Republicans gain up to 5 House seats in next year's midterms, supported by President Donald Trump. Abbott ordered the Texas Department of Public Safety to locate and return absent lawmakers, but said warrants only apply within Texas. He also warned that funding absent members' fines could lead to bribery charges. Meanwhile, California Governor Gavin Newsom vowed to fight fire with fire, preparing a mid-decade redistricting plan to counter Texas Republicans if the redistricting proceeds. The standoff continues as Texas's special legislative session remains in progress. Let's listen in to what Gavin Newsom had to say.
The proposal that we're advancing with the legislature has a trigger. Only if they move forward to dismantling the protocols that are well established would the state of California move forward in kind, fighting, yes, fire with fire. So in that light, I believe there's consistency.
Well, joining us on this update is Ross Feingold, a political analyst, joining us live from Taipei, Taiwan. As always, Ross, a pleasure to have you on the programme. Could you provide some context on why this redistricting is so key and why it's been brought to the fore now?
The context is pretty straightforward. The Republicans in the House of Representatives barely have a majority. There's a few open seats and people don't always show up, but basically they're looking on most votes, they're looking at a 3-seat to 5-seat majority. So it's very razor thin. And also President Trump wants them to do it. President Trump has been very outspoken in calling on Texas to do this. And Republicans at the federal or the state level are very responsive to President Trump's requests. So the state legislature and the governor are moving ahead. And also they do have a large majority. So putting aside the quorum issue, if the quorum issue is resolved, they could easily pass this. So another reason why they're doing it is frankly, it's because they can.
Yes, Ross, how do you react to the comments from Gavin Newsom?
It's understandable that Democrats are going to look to have some kind of substantive response. You know, within the Democrat Party or among Democratic pundits or supporters, there's been long-running criticism that they don't fight back hard enough when Republicans take significant actions to disadvantage Democrats or Democrat political priorities. So it's not a surprise that there is a groundswell of support among Democratic politicians for certain states like New York, Illinois, and California to do this. And then, of course, there's the 2028 factor, which is really the high likelihood as of this moment that Gavin Newsom is going to enter the Democratic primary for the presidential nomination.
Yes, Ross, on the surface, this could look like more, not necessarily chaos, but at least a lack of status quo in American politics. Do you see it like that, or is there something else at play here?
That's just the current era that we're living in. People are, again, whether it's at the federal level or the state level, if you have power, you use it. Democrat governors in states with large Democrat majorities in the state legislatures also wield power in a similar fashion. At the federal level, obviously, President Trump, in his 6 months in office, has really taken executive power in new directions, and he's had some significant court success with the way that he has wielded executive authority. He's had some defeats as well, but generally he's been successful in creating a new model for presidential authority. And similarly, within the party, within the Republican Party, his word is really what goes. So if he says do something, then again, Republicans at the federal and the state level are going to follow his instruction.
Ross, as we bring an end to this discussion, of course, Democrats that have fled the state of Texas, there have been potential talks of bribery charges if fines are paid by other parties. Does this risk escalation?
Certainly, if the prosecutors in Texas were to bring such charges, it would certainly be an escalatory move, and then it would wind up in the courts. And really, there's no way to know how the courts would rule on that. I mean, it's a bit of a novel charge to say that is bribery, but a judge might or appellate courts might uphold that conviction. So it's certainly possible that these Democrats who have fled Texas, if they do seek third-party financial support, they might be facing bribery charges. In the current environment, if the Texas prosecutors were to pursue those charges, it would definitely not be a surprise.
Ross, as always, a pleasure to have you on the programme. Thank you ever so much for that excellent insights on that topic. It will be a discussion we continue to have as we see what plays out in Texas and other states potentially like California. But moving on, as Pakistani police arrested 120 activists from former Prime Minister Imran Khan's party ahead of planned protests on Tuesday, marking the second anniversary of Khan's jailing. Most arrests occurred in Lahore, Pakistan's most politically significant region. Despite the crackdown, Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf vowed to proceed with demonstrations. Punjab officials accused PTI of causing chaos and disrupting peace, labelling it a disguised terrorist group. Khan, ousted in 2022 after falling out with the military, denies all charges against him, calling them politically motivated. His arrest in 2023 triggered nationwide protests and a government crackdown on his party. PTI remains the largest party from the 2024 elections, though it alleges vote rigging. The current government, led by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, rejects claims of electoral fraud. Khan has urged supporters to hold peaceful protests until democracy is restored in Pakistan. Well, joining us to discuss this topic will be Dr. Vipul Saxena, but we do just wait on him. Of course, allegations of vote rigging, also potential protests set to take place in Pakistan. If they do go ahead, how they will be responded to is a question that many experts and political analysts have. The situation, of course, could be made more complicated by these activists that have been detained in Lahore. Of course, this all happening while Imran Khan remains in incarceration. But as you can see on screen, he is urging for peaceful demonstrations. And joining us now is Dr. Vipul Saxena, a geopolitical expert. Joining us from New Delhi. Dr. Saxena, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. How could this play out? If there are protests, if there are peaceful or maybe not peaceful, how much instability could this cause in Pakistan?
See, I would like to take you to the history of Pakistan from 2024, when the democratic elections were conducted and Imran Khan party got full majority, rather thumping majority. But then, you know what happens in Pakistan. It is military which actually rules the Pakistan. So whichever government do not cooperate with military, they forcibly move them out of the power. And that is what the military did with Imran Khan, because he was not towing the line of Pakistan army. And finally, he has been put into jail on various charges, which have never been proved. And Shahbaz Khan was made as a kind of interim prime minister without an election. He lost the election, but still he's a prime minister. So this is the history, and now since nothing has been proved and public movement is now getting momentum, so there was a plan of big protest in Lahore on 5th of August, for which they declared in the month of March itself that two sons of Imran Khan, whose names are Suleiman and Qasim, they would travel from London to Pakistan, and they will join this huge countrywide protest, and they will throw this illegal, unauthorized government from the power. So it is something to do with that, and to keep an elected government's party under pressure. This is what military is doing, putting innocent people in the jail, and rather they are taking away their right to protest, which is very, very unfair, and which shows that Pakistan never had a democracy, because hardly they had any kind of democratic elected government.
Dr. Saxena, what are the wider ramifications of this potential instability in Pakistan? Of course, recently we've heard comments from the United States about potential further strengthening of bilateral ties. Also, of course, in the wake of tensions and action, military action between Pakistan and India. How do you see this playing out and potentially impacting the wider region and global situation with Pakistan?
So I would say that this is the right situation for Donald Trump and United States of America to prove that they are the flag bearer of democracy. They are the flag bearer of people's mandate. And here is the government in Pakistan, which is the stooge of Pakistan army, and the elected prime minister is behind the jail, and his party and his sons, they are protesting. So in all probability, I would say, if Donald Trump and America really stand for the democracy and democratic value and democratically elected government, I think they should break the ties with Asim Munir, who was hosted a lunch by Donald Trump in America recently. There should be no connection with Asim Munir anymore, and rather Trump and America should support this public protest and see that the unauthorizedly sitting prime minister is thrown out and elected prime minister Imran Khan is put into place.
Dr. Vipul Saxena, as always, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us on that topic. We now move on though, and the remains of 32 people have been found at a property in Irapuato, central Mexico. This according to the Guanajuato State Attorney's General Office. Authorities started a search on July the 30th as part of a strategic investigation involving intelligence analysis and coordination between multiple departments. This coming from the office, who made a statement. The search concluded on August the 2nd. 15 of the victims have been identified, while efforts continue to identify the remaining individuals, clarify the circumstances surrounding the discovery and prosecute those responsible. Guanajuato has long been one of Mexico's most violent regions, where criminal groups fight over control of the drugs trade and commit other crimes. Well, a shocking revelation coming out of central Mexico, extremely disturbing. But joining us to provide some more context on this situation is my colleague Asuma Kotoka, anchor and correspondent live from the NewsX World newsroom. Asuma, what more do you have for us?
Yes, like you've mentioned, Joshua, there are 32 victims whose bodies have been found while police in the location were searching for missing people. This location is particularly known for its highest rates of homicide inside of Mexico. This city called Guanajuato is 320 kilometers away from Mexico City, which is the capital of Mexico, and it accounts for every year's 10% of homicide across Mexico. And this particular incident is shocking, of course, as 32 people's bodies were found in a plastic bag, and the search for the identification for these people have been going on since 30th of July. However, only 15 people have been positively identified so far. It is because the bodies were apparently in very dismembered and fragmented state. That is why it is taking these officials to take time to identify these bodies. And something to note down that earlier, 1 month ago, just in June, so 2 months ago, just in June, there was another case of missing people, and 16 people were killed in a party in this state. And also before that, there were 17 people. They were found again in an abandoned house, just like this one. 32 people found again in an abandoned house in the same region. And something that this area is known for are two most powerful gangs in Latin America region, one of them called Santa Rosa de Lima gang and another called Jalisco New Generation Cartel. So these two are said to be involved. However, there's no confirmation, but it's just said that they too could be the reason for these kind of homicides happening in this region.
Asuma, thank you ever so much for that insight. Of course, any further updates as investigations continue after that devastating discovery we'll of course bring to you. But that is all that we have time for. For all of the latest updates from across the world, stay tuned here on NewsX World.